Organissima, New York. Your exotic skin, hair, and beauty source, and your one-stop shop for all your natural and organic skin and hair care, featuring authentic organic Moroccan oil and prickly pear seed oil and much more. Bringing you only the best, straight from the source and proudly produced in the USA. So what are you waiting for? Shop today. Organissima, New York. Your beauty is our duty.
Folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, with your host, Hurricane H. New day, new show, awesome topic. I have an excellent story and of determination, resilience, success that really can inspire a lot of folks. And whatever you're going through in life, it could be devastating and sometimes it can have detrimental outcomes. But yet it's how you take, the next step and how you can turn things around makes a difference. And we're going to do that today. So with me, without any further ado, I have Elizabeth Mikotowicz, and I got it right.
Yeah, you did.
All right. And so it's a story, this is a person who've overcome trauma, addiction, domestic violence, brain injury, prison time. But this is a designer today with a company that she's running. And so that just to give you a little brief on what we're going to be talking about today. So Elizabeth, is it Elizabeth or Liz? How do you want me to
Elizabeth.
go? Elizabeth. Okay. Elizabeth. So welcome to the show. And let's get started with the beginnings, right? How it all started then, because that story about the trauma, that and I've read some stuff. It's pretty brutal stuff that you've had to endure. So let's share that with you, because people anywhere, everywhere in the world probably can experience similar stuff, which we don't want them to. Hopefully not. Maybe this will give them some sort of awareness as well.
Yeah, I grew up in Maine. I was never exposed to violence or drugs. Like my family that adopted me, they were really great people, and I was really naive to a lot of the narcissistic psychological abuse tactics. And so when I got out on my own, I ended up with this really abusive man. And it wasn't like he just slapped me around a few times. It was like he hit me once and I was in the hospital with my skull showing. And when I was in the hospital for that, I found out I was pregnant with my son. And so they literally had to sew the muscle back and then sew the skin back. And I couldn't lift this eyebrow for a year. They told me I was going to have plastic surgery to get it fixed. And now I had this huge scar on my, forehead that I was really self-conscious about. And I started having seizures from the brain damage. And I would literally go deaf and blind for moments at a time. And they told me I was on too small of a dose to get addicted, which is a lie that the pharmacy companies, love to push out there to get people addicted and profit off of their suffering. And also, I was on state insurance now. I wasn't on my parents' private insurance. So I noticed I was treated a lot differently. And when they sent me to the pain clinic, because at first I took the painkillers, but when it was clear that this was going to be, a chronic pain issue and it was not going to go away, I was like, I don't want to be on this stuff. I'm pregnant. I don't want to be addicted. I don't want my baby to be addicted. None of that. And they literally told me that if I refuse, it would result in a call to Child Protective Services, because I was refusing medical advice and my blood pressure was skyrocketing from the amount of pain I was in, which they said was causing the baby distress. But, opioids, all they do is make the pain receptors in your brain more sensitive. So when it wears off, you're in twice the amount of pain. And Big Pharma knew this. And so they were just happy to push it on everybody. They came through the back door of rural communities, like my community in Maine. And I watched everybody fall apart on pills. I watched my community, pretty much go down the toilet because of these big pharma companies. And so, the abuse got worse. He would trap me in the bathroom and literally torture me for hours. Like, it would start with me begging for my life, and it would end with me begging him to kill me just to get it over with. And he choked me to the point, if you have a partner that chokes you or strangles you, they are 600 times more likely to kill you. That was a really hard statistic for me to learn, because he choked me to the point my windpipe was damaged. And so I would have these fits. Up to a year after this, my throat would randomly just close. Like if I had hiccups or anything like that, my throat would close. And I would have to chug water just to be able to breathe. And this was terrifying. And so I finally went to Spruce Run, the battered women's shelter in Bangor, Maine. And they called me a liar, because they said I wasn't crying. Most victims come in and they're crying. So I didn't cry on cue, and they called me a liar. So I brought in my medical records. I gave them the number of the officer that literally brought me to the hospital when, the last showdown, when he came after me with a shotgun and was sitting out on the fire escape. Oh yeah, it was a big mess. Then they did a complete 180 and said, well, your injuries are so extensive and your situation is so dangerous, we can't help you because it puts the other women in the shelter in danger. So the girl that got one of those beds was in the same housing complex as me. She didn't get hit. The guy kicked her car. And yes, that's domestic violence, destroying property and intimidation. But in comparison to my situation, where I would have been dead if I didn't go to the hospital, like, you're going to turn me away. And then they threatened me with cops if I didn't leave. So this was like rock bottom for me. And I had made a deal with my father that if they didn't help me, I would sign temporary guardianship over to my kids. Because number one, I wasn't a safe caregiver now anyway, with, the head injury where I was going to seizures, and I wasn't, I was losing consciousness frequently. And I didn't want, my ex to show up with the cops, and then, my dad by law would have to hand my son over. So, I didn't want to go through that, horror of trying to get my kid back or something happening to him. And, drug dealers basically were the only people that helped me. And yes, they also took advantage and, was like, oh yeah, here's a bunch of drugs, go sell them. And, hopefully you don't kill yourself. But it was, just sinking further and further into a life I never wanted. I was in college. I had plans. Like I wanted to do stuff. And I caught charges in 2011. And then the feds picked up. After I was done, I didn't go back to selling drugs. I still used here and there, but not like strung out, every day or anything like that. And the feds picked it up, and I got held accountable for the same drugs twice. So that whole double jeopardy thing doesn't exist for drug dealers in America. And, it was a nonviolent drug crime, first time offense. And I was lucky to get 37 months. If I was a black woman or a brown woman, I probably would have gotten 6 to 9 years. And that does not sit well with me at all. I grew up in Maine thinking that, oh yeah, we had the civil rights movement and things used to be, oppressive and racist, but now everything's good and everything's, equal. Like, I was under this illusion of white supremacy my whole life, and I had to go to prison to finally see through that. And, like my first week at Somerset County, I witnessed an entire pod of women get stripped out because they signed up for a razor, and a male sergeant wanted a list of who shaved their vaginas and who didn't. Those that did were punished. This is the PG stuff that goes on in prison. And, 70% of women in American prison have some sort of domestic violence or sexual assault before they even get to prison. So we're the women that slipped through the cracks, that society failed, and we were so desperate, we turned to a life of crime because we had no other option. I had exhausted all other options before I started breaking the law. And, most of the drug dealers that, people talk about, no, crime's so high, they're just people trying to pay their rent and feed their kids. And, it's so hard to even survive now in this country. People are forced to break the law in order just to get their basic needs met. If people's basic needs were provided for and easily attained, we wouldn't have such a high crime rate. And, the other thing is, one thing I learned is that predators flock to these institutions for employment, because they know that juvenile children aren't going to be believed and women in prison aren't going to be believed because we have felonies, we have drug charges, so it's okay if you abuse us. It's okay if you rape us. I had conservative women telling me when I got out of prison, if I don't want to get raped by cops, then I shouldn't go to jail. Like, just say you're okay with cops being predators because that's what you mean. So, yeah, another thing about prison is, I hear this argument that, inmates get free health care and blah, 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 blah. Well, 60% of the prison doctors in Alabama have lost their medical license. And doctors who have lost their medical license are allowed to work at prisons, and they're allowed to work at native clinics. So that was a disgusting dose of racism and genocide that's still going on in this country against, natives. And I think it's absolutely disgusting. I watch so many women die of very treatable things in prison because they just won't get them the health care. For instance, this one girl, her job was shoveling snow, and she slipped on the ice and broke her foot. By the time they brought her to the hospital, they had to re-break her leg because the bone had fused back together. This is barbaric, and it's completely unnecessary. Especially, I was camp status. They don't even have fences holding us in. Like, we can literally walk off the compound anytime we want. We are there on our own accord. And, they like to continue to push this. I have authority over you. Yeah, and I can leave whenever I want, and make you look like idiots to the BOP. But, that's different topic. So while I was at Cumberland County, they used to bring these juveniles with us. And this one girl, she was 17. She stabbed a CO at Long Creek because she repeatedly got raped. So they brought her with us. Just to terrorize this little girl further, on Christmas, they tell her that she's going back to Long Creek for her last 2 weeks. She slit her throat that night. This is better than going to some of these institutions. And I'll say it again, predators flock to and be employed at these institutions because they know they're going to get away with it. And, this is what we really need to address, because these institutions have too much power and they're allowed to conduct their own investigations, and they will cover it up before they answer for any crimes because it makes them look bad. At Somerset County, I was forced to strip in front of cameras under duress of being maced and extracted. And for all of you out there who thinks, oh, well, I would just refuse. You can refuse. That's your choice. You will be met with fully armed, suited up SWAT team with, electric shock shields that electrocute you, with, batons, mace. They have these canisters they throw in your cell, and it's chemically designed to take the oxygen out of your throat. And, if they hit one cell, it hits all of them because it comes through the vents. So the rest of the inmates who weren't doing anything to piss them off are getting hit with this. And it's terrifying being in one of those cells and you can't breathe. And so I was forced to strip under duress of being maced and extracted. I also had a female sergeant telling me to kill myself when they gave me the wrong medication and I was in full-blown psychosis, because they gave me the wrong medication for my diagnosis. And nobody ever likes to talk about when doctors give you the wrong psych meds and what can happen to you and how bad, it can affect you. But that's what was happening to me. And she told another inmate to kill themselves, and it was in the paper after I got out. They had to cut that inmate down from a suicide attempt. This is how these officers are treating people with mental health issues in America. Like, they are pushing them to the brink of suicide. And, there was an 18-year-old little girl who got convicted of manslaughter because she kept telling her boyfriend to kill himself, and he actually did it. So you can lock up a sick little 18-year-old girl, but this officer at Somerset County Jail can tell multiple inmates with mental health issues to kill themselves, even get one of them to attempt it, and she still gets to keep her pension. And so when I got to Alderson Prison, I filed a PREA complaint against Somerset County. That stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. So anything sexual goes under a PREA complaint. When Alderson got the response back, they wouldn't even allow me to hold it, to read it myself. They wouldn't give me a copy. they wouldn't let me send it home. And this is how they bury the abuse. These institutions cover for each other because the boys in blue, it's just one big gang. And I'm not here to push that all cops are bad, because for every cop that tried to hurt me, there was another risking their job trying to make it stop. So I'm not pushing this agenda that all cops are bad, because, you know, that's not necessarily true. There's just a very big number of them that are, and they're not held accountable, and bad behavior is awarded. So Somerset County admitted to everything I had complained about, and then they deemed it unfounded. So that's it. When they deem it unfounded, it doesn't go any higher. So these institutions cannot continue to be allowed to do their own investigations. That's the bottom line. And so when you get out, you have 100 days to file a complaint. And so what Alderson did by not letting me have it, you know, I went to the Freedom of Information Act. They couldn't even find this complaint. And so you have 100 days to file a complaint. The first thing they ask you is, was there an outcry at the time? Did you file the paperwork? Where's the proper chain of command? Well, yes, I did, but they wouldn't give it to me. They wouldn't even let me send it home. So this is how they're bearing the abuse. And when I got out, the captain at Alderson, Captain Grimes, and 4 of his subordinates all got convicted of raping and stalking inmates and tampering with PREA evidence. I wasn't even close to their worst victim, but, you know, here we are. And I'm still trying to get this paperwork from Somerset County. I requested it when I got out. They wrote me a letter, the same captain who did the investigation and deemed it unfounded, while admitting to everything I was complaining about. And it's illegal in the state of Maine, in the DOJ book, for cameras to be inside of a cell on an inmate, where they go to the bathroom, where, you know, they sleep, all of that. So he writes me back and says, we already gave you it, so we don't have to give you another copy. And if you want a copy, you're going to have to get a lawyer to subpoena it. So I got a lawyer, and he requested the paperwork as well. And he said, you can't subpoena paperwork without an open case, and you can't open a case without a paperwork. So they know what they're doing. And they don't have to follow the law because it's an institution. You know, by law, they have to give it to me, but there's no consequence if they don't. So one of the bills I am pushing for, and I think this should go across the board, quite frankly, in America, that an institution gets fined, like, I don't know, $500 a day for every day they stonewall an inmate on the paperwork, because this creates other problems too. I tried to get my medical records. They wouldn't give me my medical records. So now these doctors are like, well, we can't prove that you were on this medication, so we got to give it to you again because of insurance issues. I'm like, I'm telling you this medication made me suicidal, and you're making me go on it again because there's no record of it. Like, I understand I have mental health issues or a mental health diagnosis, but you should listen to what I'm saying, because I'm self-aware and I know what's happening to me. Just because I have a hard time, you know, keeping my emotions in check because of trauma and whatnot, doesn't mean I don't understand what's happening to me. And so this creates all kinds of problems, and these institutions need to be held accountable. And it's not just the jails, it's the colleges, it's, you know, the military, it's big institutions that care more about their reputation than, you know, doing what's right. And it's become very predatory, and, you know, automatically, you know, like I said, women like me are not going to be believed. So I am a predator's favorite victim. And, you know, that's really, I am, because they know, oh, she's got a bipolar diagnosis. She's been to prison. No one's going to believe her. That is how they look at it. And that's the truth.
So Elizabeth, I let you go through the whole thing. And I think you've covered like maybe 20 topics that we can have 20 episodes for. You know, each one of them can actually has its own, you know, merit and discussion. But really, first of all, I have to say, wow. I mean, there's no words to really, I guess, break this down any easier. I think for our audiences watching or listening right now, they'll just be like, you know, open mouth and just like, what the hell, right? I mean, you would think this is a movie story, like, you know, literally like one of those, you know, movies. but we're talking to you. You've experienced this. Ultimately, we're taking your word for it. Obviously, this is you telling us, but because someone will always, there's always someone that's just like, well, maybe she just wants to talk about it. And I'm just disclaiming that because some people are always gonna. I get
Oh,
curious.
I know. I
Feels
get
like,
it.
it's just a show.
And
Well,
it's funny because when I used to disassociate, like in like super stressful, traumatic situations, that's exactly what I would say. I'd be like, this is a movie. Like, this is not happening. Like, this is not my life. And so it's funny you said that.
well, no. I mean, listen, first of all, I have no reason not to believe you. I actually believe you. I mean, it is real. You've gone through this, and what there's so many things I want to just tackle one by one. The first thing is just the relationship that got you into the original domestic violence, which eventually got you not only hurt, but the trauma, I guess the mental piece, as well as getting forced to eventually get into the drug and really go into that, because that's some people. I mean, people are judgmental, right? So some
Oh
people
yeah, they are.
will say like, well, it was your fault. You selected this relationship. You're the one who decided this. There's always a way out, and there is a logic in that thought process, right? I mean, because we do have choices, but no
You're
one
right.
can.
And it's funny because people have said that to me before. Well, why did you stay? Well, when I tried to leave, I got held hostage in my own house for 3 days and beaten and raped. So, not to mention, he threatened to kill my kids and my family. So, like, that's what happens when women try to leave. That's why women stay, because they either don't have the funds to leave, they physically have no way out, or they are so mentally broken and terrified. Like, it's just, they can't even fathom that. And also the thing about the shelters, this is a problem with victim-based shelters. Like a friend of mine, she was a sex trafficking survivor, and she was trying to get into the human trafficking shelter. They turned her away because she wouldn't snitch her pimp out. Like, it is not these victims' job to do law enforcement's job for them. Like, you are trying to get something out of this victim. You're already getting funding to help these women. And the only way you're going to help them is if you get a testimony out of them. You want them to put themselves in harm's way. These pimps have, their IDs, where their kids live. These pimps know how to get these women cornered so that they're helpless.
Well, thank you for adding that to the discussion, because right now let's tackle the domestic violence piece, right? And that is by the way, in the States, as well developed as we think we are as a country, we have it. It is a reality and by the way, it's in the cities, it's in the suburbs, it's everywhere, and all communities have these things. As a matter of fact, even in the most affluent neighborhoods, one of the most calls are domestic violence calls. Not anything else. There's no real crime, but that's a crime in itself. I mean, there's no murder. I mean, maybe once in occasion you get something in an affluent neighborhood, but you do get drugs and you get some of domestic calls, and it depends on what city, depends what county, depends where you are. There are services, obviously. There's definitely shelters, and some companies will provide some help and so on and so forth. But you're right, there is a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of bureaucracy, red tape, and so on and so forth. And these little fine, prints, are where people don't know. And if you don't have the guidance, there's a good chance you're gonna be on your own. There's the fear factor, as you said. I mean, let's. I'm gonna just put it blunt. It happened. You got a relationship. It can happen to anyone. You don't know
it's not like these men tell you I'm a woman beating sociopath. No, they have a mask on and they are very good manipulators.
I hear, and by the way, there's both sides, men and women.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going there, but just as a again, to be clear, for our audiences, this is not a male or female thing. It happens. Obviously, there's more female that are being abused than men, I would say, in that. And by the way, this is not in the States. It's also now becoming a worldwide event. I mean, it's happening all over the world. Yeah. And but what you're talking about is, a relationship can happen. It happens in high schools, in mid schools now. I mean, it's everywhere, right? And you never know until that person becomes possessive and aggressive and so on and so forth. And there's the pretext of love or feelings, whatever. I don't want to leave. And then that's usually, how it starts. And then there is that
trauma
obsession.
bonds.
Exactly. And then now the fear becomes, a real thing, and you don't want to go because you're afraid. Now, a lot of specialists, a lot of doctors, and would tell you, like, if you have a sign, you need to walk away, and it's easier said than done, because that's the part that, unless you've gone through it, you're not going to understand it. People can be very obsessive with people, and they can tend to react, and then they might need help themselves, and sometimes that's the problem. If you tell them you need help, it's like, no, I don't need help, I'm good, I'm fine. Even though this reaction, the actual anger and so on and so forth, this is all psychology one-on-one. It's happening in real time, but then you are the victim of it. And yes, now you said you had a child. Now that's the other thing. Now you have a kid in the mix. It becomes even harder to leave. Most of the women that eventually claim, some sort of a domestic violence later on in their lives, they would have hidden it from family, from a lot of folks, until
I hid it from everybody. Because I was scared someone was going to call the CPS on me. I was scared, all types of things could happen.
So Elizabeth, that's the thing. Now, if it were only you, it's one thing. But now when you have kids, now you're afraid to lose your children, or because of not safe environments and so on and so forth. But yet you're also a victim just as much as they are. You should all be able to move there, but it's not happening. And at least not the. I can say, I've seen services that do deliver. Depends. In the New York City area, and there's a lot of services that work. But again, I can't talk about all of them, and I have not really. I've interacted with some of these services over the years because of my healthcare work, and I do work for the insurance companies. I've worked in the community, and so we've done some work. It's a big deal, right? And but not to the rate where it makes a difference to where you like what you would expect, right? To your point, the only thing that can do it is legislation, and if you're lucky, that can make a difference, right? And I think you're a great voice for it, and you're doing the work, and you're talking to reps, and hopefully you get some bills passed. But so that's the first thing. So again, to get that, the first part of the discussion is that domestic violence is real. It is difficult. It affects the psyche. It affects your health. It affects everything else, and it can be. You could have easily killed the man. That's one. And then now being in the government, hospitality, in the federal.
And then I'd be in prison for life.
For life, exactly.
I was in prison with women who finally snapped after being beaten and raped by their husbands for years.
Well, it would be self-defense, but you have to prove it.
No, women don't get self-defense very often. They do not get self-defense for killing a man very often. It's very rare. And one of the women I was in prison with, she was in the hospital for 2 weeks because of what he did to her before they could even arrest her. And she's still doing 57 years because he was a Marine and a man, and he was cheating on her, beating her. They found drugs in his system and everything, but that was all fine because, he's, deitized, as a Marine. And, there is a class system in this country, and white men are at the top of it. So if you kill a white man and you're anybody else, you have a very slim chance of getting self-defense in this country. And that's just what it is. And, it's funny because
you're scaring people. You're bringing the reality of this is like real, discussions, from you experiencing these things. But what you are sharing is pretty powerful. Allegations, I would say, but they are real because you know them. But for most people, they're allegations to proven otherwise. But the fact is, there is smoke, there's fire, right? So there is right. That, and most people would tend to agree that people that understand the system will probably agree with you. And I keep my opinion neutral for the show's purposes, but the fact is, I get it. I understand. What it means. There's so many things that we can talk about in terms of the discrimination. We talk about who's what where. Today there's a big movement about women's equality in a lot of areas, and this is probably one of them. That we can add to the list, right? So there's that. But to your point, you had no choice eventually. Now people can say, like, you're wrong, Hurricane. She had the choice. She could have walked. I can tell you guys, when you're in a difficult situation, nobody knows what you're going through except you. And, we can assume, we can guess, we can potentially have ideas of how it could be done. But if you're not experiencing it, you're not going to know it. And that's it. And it's like when someone
I did walk a few times and he called CPS on me. and said I was doing drugs.
But see, but that's the thing. So someone can say, well, you could have let him do that, and then what's the next step? I mean, that was a choice too. Obviously, you as a mother, you would not accept that. But see, that's the thing.
Right.
Someone who has kids would understand that. Someone who doesn't may not understand that. So you have all these ifs and whats and what ifs, and those are difficult questions. And yes, this is not a blame. It's you did what you could at the time with what you had.
Yeah.
And that's usually what's happening with everybody. And by the way, that happens in real life and to all of us in any type of situation. That's what we have. We have a set of circumstances. We use what we can in our brains at the time, whatever we feel is necessary to do it. Sometimes it pans out, sometimes it doesn't. And the outcomes just roll out from there. It becomes an avalanche, right? And it gets bigger. And before you know it, there is definitely repercussions that can be detrimental. And in your case, you found an easy way out and ultimately to get some funding. And that's the other thing. Easy money. Drugs can do easy money, and it's a quick way to get in. And of course, if you get hooked, that's another one. So now you have the hook. You have to get you in, and that's it. You can't get out because you need it. And so now you have a way to exchange that. I mean, this is common. We've seen it in movies, but it's real. I mean, those movies, they depict realities of, and sometimes to a lighter degree, because the reality can be even worse. Actually, I've worked in the communities, and I've seen real. I mean, most people don't see the real America, and there have been documentaries, out there that actually really demonstrate. I mean, if you go to Netflix, there are some documentaries. If you go to, some of the shows out there, they've done some of these, programs where you can see the real, how people live. You see the luxuries, but you can also see the real, deal. And those are not real events. These are not real. Fun stories. They're actually difficult stories to absorb, and they're real people who are actually going through these things. And that's the part. It's amazing. You don't have to go. I mean, New York, in Jersey, in Florida, in California. It doesn't matter where you are. There's a level of this happening every single minute. Now there is just there is that discussion. I mean, I love what you said. There's good cops and bad cops, and again, correction officers, versus regular law enforcement versus federal. I mean, these are all different agencies, different systems in a way. They might be all.
They're all in the same.
Correct. I'm not
blue,
gonna.
Blue category.
You have them blanketed, as one painted, brush. But again, I cannot change that from you because you have experienced it, and I can speak about it, but I would not know what it is.
Well, I'm not trying to sit here and say all cops are bad or anything like that, because for everyone that well,
I appreciate
oppressed me or hurt me, there was another risking their job trying to make it stop, and that's a problem within itself, because bad behavior gets rewarded, and the cops that are actually saving people and trying to show them compassion and hold abusive cops accountable, they're getting their career stomped on, and that shouldn't happen.
But Elizabeth, what you're saying here is true for all humanity. There's only two kinds of people, the good and the bad, right? And unfortunately, in every walk of life, you're going to have those. You're going to have the good and the bad, and in some circumstances, you probably have more bad than good. In this case, in the system, you're probably going to have that, because there is that visual effect that all of the folks that are in that facility are doing bad because they were bad people, right? But if you talk to a psychiatrist, I mean, someone that actually has a mission, for example, driven concept, they'll tell you, we want to help people not to get there. We want to help people. And you're right. I mean, if you go through the regular system, you're probably not going to get the top of the, care, right? In the U.S., we have sick care.
Well, considering prison doctors, they let doctors who have lost their license with the medical board, work at prisons and native clinics. So that's what you're going to get.
So again, I don't know the facts about that. And again, I'll check it out, because I'll take your word for it, because again, see, I'm in the insurance space, and I can tell you, if someone loses their license, they cannot be on the system, at least not there. But I can't speak for the correction, facilities, because if that's the case, maybe they're not put in as doctors. Maybe they're like aides, and the title may be different. I don't know. So I can't even go there, because sometimes there's always a way around things, right? Because being board certified is one thing, or you can have no license and still practice under a different realm, and maybe just as, an assistant, for example, right? There's ways to do this. And I don't know if there is a way that they use it that way, or they just simply just get someone who's got no license and still operate. either way, I think that is not the overall story. But again, we don't know. I mean, you have experienced it, firsthand, and again, I would now I'm interested in maybe discussing this with some other folks and bring in maybe a panel and having a little discussion from all sides and see like what they have to say about this, because that could be a good discussion. So that's
I would love that. I would love that because I would love to call them out on their BS. Like, for instance, when you go to prison, I'm sure everybody's wondering why there's such a high rate of incarceration in America. We literally make up 25% of the global incarceration population, only 5% of the world. And that's because when you go to prison, they put you to work for 40 hours a week and pay you $5.25 a month. Well, a hospital saves three. Yes, a month. $5.25 a month. Not a week, not a day, a month. And everything on the commissary, they jack the price up. So, for instance, back then, a package of ramen noodles cost 20 cents on the outside. It costs $1.50 in there. A box of tampons costs like $3 out here. It costs $8 in there. So they are extorting us at every turn. And when you get to prison, if you don't have your GED or a high school diploma, they make you take the GED. And that's great if you don't actually have a high school diploma or a GED. But what was happening, they're getting $2,000 for every inmate that enrolls in it, and then another $2,000 when the inmate graduates. So what they said is, we're not going to get your high school transcripts for you. You, the inmate with no resources, no access to the internet, no anything, have to provide us with these records, even though our entire education history is in our PSI, pre-sentencing investigation. They have all the paperwork already, but they do this so they can get the money. So we had women with doctorates and PhDs being forced to take the GED because it got the prison more money, and these staff high up there could go home with a bigger holiday bonus. And then they cut corners again and have the inmates with high levels of education teach the inmates who need the GED.
Elizabeth,
it's all about follow the money.
Elizabeth, people are not going to like you too much. You're making too much noise.
I don't care.
No, well, listen, I do hear you. And you know what? You're giving me a real idea of really bringing someone from the system to talk about these. I mean, these are questions that should be asked to anyone. I mean, obviously, no one's going to admit to these things if they're really on the wrong side.
No, they're not.
They might have an explanation to it, but it would be interesting to see like what that reaction and response would be.
And when they would get their inspections, like with the state to inspect the buildings, we had an inch of black mold all in the showers at Danbury. I mean, the building is a health hazard. But they got investors to pay $80 billion for a brand new facility to house 40 more women, at a time that they could make money off of. So they're having inmates doctor up and duct tape and paint over and cover up all of these health code violations so they don't get in trouble. And people's health go downhill in these older facilities like really quick. I mean, it was awful. I mean, there'd be roaches, there'd be mice, there'd be all kinds of horrible stuff that should not be in these government facilities, but they don't care because they're making money off us. There's a section at Alderson called the bus stop. It's okay. So you have a unit and everybody has their own cube. Well, at the front, they have all these bunk beds stacked next to each other. And it's a fire code violation to have that many people in one place. But one inmate pays their fine off 20 times over within, a couple month period of time. So they just pay their fine every year instead of abiding by fire codes and fire safety laws because it makes them more money.
So you're touching on the fact that it's lucrative, but is there any connection with this in terms of because they just see inmates as inmates and they don't dare
products. They see us as a product.
Okay.
And so they're willing to break laws because it gets them more products. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Like, we have corporations offering to buy a lot of these prisons as long as they stay at 90% capacity, as long as they say 90% full. They're not trying to make people better. They want them to go back to prison. I keep hearing, oh, the system's broken. The system's broken. No, the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is bypass slavery laws and, rebrand it with mass incarceration and demonize these people. Oh, they're drug addicts. They have mental health issues. They're criminals. They're this. So you're going to throw all these people away and put them to work for free. So your corporations don't have to pay people a minimum wage. And that's what's really disgusting to me. And over the pandemic, we went from 3 empty properties for every homeless man, woman, and child to 29 empty properties for every homeless man, woman, and child. And meanwhile, these prisons all across the country were taking out PPP loans to expand their prisons and add more wings to get more inmates in there and get more people in jail. And look what's happening. They're criminalizing homelessness. In a lot of different cities, you can't even feed a homeless person without the risk of getting a fine. So you've created this housing crisis. You have all of these homeless people, and now in a lot of places you're criminalizing it. So what's going to happen to these people? They're going to go to jail, and they're going to be put to work for pennies a day.
Oh, so Elizabeth, I'm gonna just throw in one little question. Someone says, if you had to leave the country before all this, would you have done it?
Yes.
So the reason I'm asking this, because I know there's actually an increase in expatriates right now. In a lot of people are actually leaving the States to live in Costa Rica and other parts of the world.
I don't blame them.
and it is happening. I think that the rate has just increased recently post pandemic, for various reasons. Economy is one of them, and I guess just lifestyle, rules, law, and all this stuff. To kind of avoid. I mean, if you see a difficult situation, sometimes you have to remove yourself and go from it. Now, if you get caught in the current, is over. I mean, that where you were is like rip current, right? You basically get sucked in, and it's very difficult to come out of it. And if you come out, you're lucky to come out of it. There's always going to be an impact on you, and that's exactly what happened. So I think we spent a lot of time on this, and we can spend more. But I do want to touch on the shelters piece that you talked about, where it was. There were different rules about them, who can get in, who cannot, and obviously you were kind of almost rejected from those, and so that didn't work for you. I guess this is a question for anyone watching and listening. I mean, maybe if you do have any ideas, come on the show. We can talk about it. Maybe we can give some resources to people how to navigate the system. But it is a difficult test, and I get it. I mean, these are not-for-profit services in general. And these people, some people are volunteers. They get overcrowded easily in some parts, right?
There were 2 beds open when I went there. They literally told me we have 2 beds available, but we're not going to take you.
You said the reason was?
Well, first they called me a liar because they said I didn't cry. All the other women apparently come in crying. I didn't cry.
You should have just busted crying. You just have to.
I was in shell shock. My ex held a knife I was 8 months pregnant. And he was pushing me around, and I started crying, and he held a knife up to my face and goes, "One more tear rolls down your cheek, I'm going to cut your face off." So after that, I didn't cry. I bottled it all up, and I would just go into straight shell shock. So then I had it used against me again by this shelter, and they literally said, "Well, we don't believe you because you weren't crying." And so I went and I got proof. I got my medical records. They talked to the police. And then all of a sudden my situation was too severe and too dangerous because my injuries were so extensive, and they were worried about the other women in the shelter. They weren't worried about me. They were just worried about the other women in the shelter who didn't actually get hit. The guy just kicked their car. And that's domestic violence. Absolutely. I'm not trying to, say anything about that, because breaking property and intimidation is absolutely domestic violence. But in compared to my situation where I literally would have died if I hadn't gone to the hospital, that's what makes me angry. And, I don't think I would have fallen so far if they had just helped me. And, that's the problem. I met so many women in prison that had a story like mine. 70% of women in there have domestic violence or sexual assault before they even go to prison.
So let's talk about that. This is a big deal. I mean, you said it, unfortunately, there is a moment where if someone intervenes and can help, there is a good chance they can make that person's outcomes better. And unfortunately, to your point, there's a percentage where that doesn't happen, and that's when someone deviates or gets into the wrong road, and then there's no coming back or point of no return, and then at that point, it's either that jail, and those are bad outcomes. Period. Right. And so, I think for audiences worldwide, whatever, if you're listening right now, viewing this, watching the show, this is where what we're trying to do is to educate people and make you aware that these things happen. And so if you can help someone, and even if you can't help them in your facility, maybe there's another facility, maybe there's something that you can do.
Right. Even point them in the right direction. Like, exactly. I mean, and that's what I was begging. I was like, well, can you tell me something, anything? Like, just tell me somewhere to go. Tell me who I can call. They said, well, if you don't leave, we're going to call the cops on you. That's what I got from them.
So I want to ask, this is a technical question. Parents, were they around, in those, or they were just completely off the discussion with you?
Oh, no, my parents were taking care of my children, and I didn't want to bring the chaos to my parents' house. You
had to endure this on your own.
Yes. And I didn't really know what to do. And yeah, my brain had been warped from, all of, the psychological trauma. And I didn't want to tell the cops because I was scared of being a snitch and, all that whole thing that goes into it. And yeah, I've seen so many situations where the cops showed up and they just didn't do anything. I mean, my biological mother's, situation, she had a witness of that man holding a knife to her throat. And the cop said, well, you need to have 3 physical assaults before you can get a protection order, crazy stuff like that. And this was like in Montana. So, I mean, domestic violence laws are different no matter where you go. And,
So question, what happened to the ex, the one that actually did all this? Was there any...
Oh, yeah, he got into a high-speed chase. He did a bunch of burglaries, stole a shotgun, came after me with it and was like on the fire escape. And then he got into a high-speed chase, and then he went to prison for that. So I was like in the free and clear. Now I just needed to get my life back and get an apartment. But I had already lost my health care for signing my kids over. And so I was trying to self-medicate and like figure everything out. And I was always on this, like, I just got to get an apartment. And then when I look at an apartment, I would literally see my own death like 20 different ways before I even walked into the apartment, because I got held hostage in my own house. So now, like, my sense of safety was gone. And I felt so much safer when I was at other people's houses because, it wasn't up to me, like, what was going to happen. Like, it was, on somebody else to deal with it. And so I really had to, like, deal with this trauma. And then when I got out of prison, it was the exact opposite. Like, I didn't want to leave my house because I had been, in solitary, and, going outside was like, bad. And it had rewired my brain in a different way. And so now every time I left my house, I was, having a panic attack. And one thing, about when you're in prison, they put you on all these different psych meds. And if you don't take them, you get written up or put in solitary or whatever they feel like doing to you. And so I was on $1,300 worth of psych meds. Some of these psych meds, if you just stop taking them, like lithium, it can kill you. Your heart can stop, whatever. You go into psychosis. All this great stuff can happen to you. So when I got out, I tried to get health care. It was the same governor as before. And they told me the only way I could get health insurance is if I got pregnant. And I'm like, I'm just trying to be okay enough to, like, be there for my other kids who are already here.
And this is in Maine?
Yes. And so I was trying to find a way to get these prescriptions paid for, and I didn't have $1,300. I didn't have a place to live yet. So I'm spacing these medications out and, slowly spiraling. And I ended up going back on probation because of it. But when I got out for good, Janet Mills had taken over, and she expanded Maine Care. And here I am.
So I was going to ask, yeah.
5.5 years later, and I'm still sober. I'm doing things I never even dreamed I would be. I'm not like some huge celebrity or anything, but I never thought I'd be talking on podcasts and, having a brand with my art, I never thought I would, have anything like that. So, it was just the bare minimum of me having healthcare and me being able to go to the doctor and therapy and trauma counseling and mat treatment when I needed it. Because I had to take care of my trauma before I could deal with my addiction, because that's what was, driving the instability and the panic and, and when you're a drug addict and you have mental health issues, whether it's chronic pain or, a PTSD trigger, your brain works against you. So say a big scary man that resembles my ex comes in and it triggers me. My brain is going to pull that card of drugs and be like, you need to do this or you're going to die. That's what my brain is literally telling me to do as an addict. And to finally understand that and, be able to overcome it, it was a long road, and I don't even get the urge to go do drugs when I get triggered anymore. I just get, pissed off for 5 minutes and then, whatever. But, you really have to understand that when an addict becomes addicted, their brain has been rewired to always go back to that substance, whether they're in chronic pain, whether they're sad, and it's going to be completely irrational. It's going to be their brain is telling them you are going to die if you don't get the substance. So, I mean, yes, addicts, choose to continue to do drugs, and you choose to get help or you choose to, remain in it. But if there's no help available, I don't really, you can't really hold people, accountable to that.
So Elizabeth, so someone could ask the question, what if you had gone to a different state, maybe, where you can not only be away from the elements, change of scenery, but also some states are more, they have different rules in terms of insurance and things that can help, and by the way, this is in New York State, for example, there's a big, a lot of people come in temporary to the state for healthcare, and obviously that's not a good thing. And so they get investigated for it because, you have to be literally a resident of the state for a minimum of a few months before you can qualify. Yeah. But in your case, you didn't have anything. You could have, literally relocated and lived your life, in a new state, and maybe over time, qualify. But in that again, maybe that time period you needed the help immediately, not wait for a few months. So I get it. Right. But you said that it got expanded, so now you were able to get the care and get into the facilities, get pretty much cleaned up, from the addiction. Because by the way, you're right. I mean, addiction is what it is. It's a tough game. I know you talked about how the drugs are manufactured, big pharma and all this stuff, and all this stuff is addictive. Unfortunately, it is. There's an addictive value in most of the drugs that are out there, especially psych meds. It is a known thing. As a matter of fact, if I'm driving with a psych medication right now in my vehicle and I don't have a prescription for it, I'll go to jail because that's actually illegal, right? So it's pretty much that, because they know that is a medication unless you have it, and even when we go to the pharmacy, if you don't have a prescription and you have ID, they will not issue you these things because they are, narcotics basically, right? So it's very difficult, and once you get caught up in that vicious circle, I mean, it is what it is. It is hard to pull from it, whether it's drugs, alcohol, in any of the type, even gambling sometimes can be just as bad, Oh, yeah. But those are all bad, things. Now, again, they're bad things. I know people can say, well, people choose to get into those circumstances sometimes are more difficult, and depends on the person. You, to your point, one thing led to the other. Before you knew it, you were already in there, and it was a little too late. So
70% of opioid addicts started because they went to their doctor. And when my problem is, when you go to the doctor, my generation, we trusted our doctors and we did what we were supposed to. When we had anxiety from, not being able to pay our college loans, we went to the doctor and they gave us benzos and they said, oh, don't worry, it's not addictive. It's not this. Only 2% get addicted. They were fed the wrong information by pharmacy companies. And, no one ever told me that these psych meds were physically addictive. They just gave them to me and said, here you go. They never told me the side effects. They never, they said you might feel a certain type of way. You might feel this. They never said it was dangerous coming off of. They never said it would put me into physical withdrawals. They never said it would, cause psychosis if they gave me the wrong medication. And this is my problem with it because, I could have avoided years of, pain and suffering and insanity if I had just been informed properly. And that's what doesn't happen, is they don't inform people. You see a doctor for 15 minutes and they are giving you these crazy psych meds, and then they're not around, and they're not picking up a phone when they go wrong.
Well, so Elizabeth, I mean, listen, you're right. It is a difficult place to be, and I mean, there's other things, like you can use some natural stuff, for someone who is just on the onset, just beginning stuff,
Right.
and I think people now more than ever are getting more aware of options and what's available out there. I mean, for example, CBD, and there's different variations of that now that can actually do some of the work that as opposed to the opioids, and it changes, dynamics. But you're right. It's all about education. Again, the world of podcasts have expanded tremendously. So there's more people, doctors that come on now and talk about these things and kind of guide people a little bit. So there is that, because in to be honest, in the regular media, you're not going to get a lot of that resource, and maybe you get a topic here and there if you catch it, maybe. But at least on the podcast, format, you have these shows that are all over the place, and people can replay them. You can connect with these resources. So there's that solution. But again, this, for someone who has gone through it, it's a very difficult, you had years of your life that were basically, you would if you could erase them, you probably would, but you can't. Obviously, they're part of you. But here's the thing. Now we're going to transit into what it did to you. At the end of the day, you are probably the strongest person today compared to wherever you were, in history. And you said it. Today, you're doing something terrific. You've actually turned alive. You got out of the addiction. You have started your own company, and you're a designer. You're doing different things, and you're actually taking it on the road. And you're also doing the mission of maybe changing some of the legislation to help maybe the next, other women, not go through the same process, women and men for that matter, because, this could be, again, we'll keep it strictly for women now, but you're right. I mean, this thing is a legislation can benefit everybody if it's a correct legislation. So you're doing the work now. Again, it's going to be difficult, but you're doing it. You're going through there, and I hope that it's happening, because every state is different, and depends on currents and things like that. You can get some supporting, folks, and hopefully you can get it done. Now the transition. I was reading that you were in the penitentiary and you were actually doing murals and stuff.
Yeah, I had one of the highest paying jobs in the prison. I got paid $57 a month to paint murals. And I would also, I had a side hustle. So I'd smuggle part of the paint back to my cube. I only got raided twice for that. But anyway, I'd paint inmates' cups, and then I'd seal it with floor wax. And, it was kind of like giving them a piece of their identity back, because, they strip you of everything. You get a number, you get the same clothes as everybody else, and you're lucky if they even call you by your name. They're call you inmate. It's very dehumanizing. And so it was kind of giving them the option back. And I had a little tattoo book of 10,000 tattoos or whatever, and people would just choose what they wanted me to paint. And yeah, I had my own little business and side hustle in there. And when I got out, I did a couple art shows. I also won a couple writing contests and got a couple of my poems published. And then I found this company called Le Galeries, and they're a Canadian company, and they take your art and turn it into this beautiful, environmentally friendly, feminine brand. And it also comes in plus sizes. And I got some stuff to show you guys. So this is one of my bags. And again, I paint all these designs. I don't make the clothes, but yeah, I paint the designs. And I made this on my own healing journey, trying to figure my own life out. This is a shawl. And I'm really weird. So one day I'll be super gothic and dark femme, and then the next day it'll be koi fish and butterflies and girly stuff. I got this is a placemat. So they also just put sheets and blankets. So I'm super excited. I'm about to paint something new and get some sheets on my website too. This is really good for summer.
Everything is handmade, right?
I actually am not sure. Now that you've asked me, I kind of feel like I should find that out. I think, I don't know, but they do they have the ability to do like mass production. So this is a pillowcase.
So you basically paint the stuff and then they produce it.
Yes, they
Okay.
produce it.
But it's your art.
Yes, it's all
Okay.
my original paintings, and so it's EPM clothing, like through La Galeries, and they have other artists too. So you have to put like my name and the added on stuff to the website, because if you just put in lagaleries.com, it's just going to bring you to their main website.
Everybody. Right,
So, and this is another one of my bags. And yeah, it's so funny. For any of you out there who, you know, have struggled in life like me or have a diagnosis or some sort of disability, there's something called vocational rehab, and it's in all 50 states. And like, they gave me a business advisor. Like, I didn't know about making a business plan or anything like that. I was a hustler and a battered woman for years. Like, I didn't know anything about that. And they taught me like how to do everything. They walked me through, you know, what I needed to do, who I needed to contact, how to make, grant application and all that stuff. And I ended up getting a $10,000 grant. And I was like, I've never gotten this much money legally before. Like, I'm so excited. And so that's how I got like my first, you know, little stash of inventory. And then I went around and I started talking shops, and I got them in a couple shops up in Bangor. And now that I'm down south, I have a couple places that are interested and that want me to paint some girls. So hopefully and if anybody out there has a shop that wants like something different and unique, you know, from the norm, this brand is definitely different, and I can do wholesale. So yeah, and if you want something personalized, or, you know, I could do that too.
I love that
And
about you, because you really are taking it to a different level. They're beautiful, by the way. I mean,
thank you.
great work. And looking at it and looking at your just excitement about it now, like you are a new person. You have become someone that you could have been that same person all along. You just had to go through this unfortunate, you know, events to actually get to today. Here's the good news, and I think that's the part that we want to make sure that people get, is that I started the discussion about resilience and determination, and, you know, and just making it through, and really you got through all this, but after all the hiccups and all this stuff, now you are out there trying to make a difference, one, by educating people and sharing your story. By the way, your story could be a tremendous movie. You know,
You are not the first podcast host to tell me that. One of the first podcasts I did, they were like, you got to get on Lifetime. Like, your story like puts their work to shame. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately it's true.
I get it, but again, you never know, right? You got to be out there.
Right.
People have to hear it, but it is impressive. I mean, the stuff that I can just literally, you're talking, I'm watching the whole movie. I mean, literally in my mind, I visualized everything, and it's very interesting, because I think everybody that's actually watching and listening right now would have the same visual, you know, of all those circumstances you had to. I mean, we've talked about it now. I think you could do a movie easily with that one, you know, or a book. I mean, at least to start with a book, and that could be something that you can start with right now.
My publicist told me not to talk about that.
Oh, okay. So that's it. That's enough. Good enough for me. Which means it's happening, and congratulations on that. You know, but
I actually started whatever that may be in prison, so it was like very fresh when I wrote it.
Listen, but that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, what you've gone through, right? But what you're going to write now is going to potentially help someone else or many other people not to go through it. And that leads me to my question: is if Elizabeth travels back in time right now, and what would you do different, and what would you recommend to girls at that age today?
Well, you know, if I've had people ask me like, well, would you just turn away from him and, you know, never talk to him? No, I wouldn't. I would go through it all again, because if I didn't go through it, I wouldn't have my son. And, you know, I love that little boy more than anything. And I'd go through that, you know, 1,000 times over just to have him in my life. And, you know, I think sometimes you're put through things to put an end to it so that other people don't have to go through it. And, you know, I never thought myself as a political person, but, you know, I just kept getting so mad about nobody. I felt like nobody understood what the problem was. And so I started going and I started talking to legislation, and I started going to, political meetings and, telling them what they were doing wrong. And they actually listened to me. The city of Bangor, it didn't pass in the state of Maine, but they passed this in the city of Bangor because I threw a fit about it. So we had all these landlords that were, charging these ridiculous application fees, and they were getting 3 times the rent and just not renting the apartment to anybody because they're getting 3 times the rent in these application fees and processing fees and all these other junk fees that they don't really need and aren't, there's no reason for them. You just want free money from people. It's like the banks and their overdraft fees. There's no reason for that. You don't need it. You are just nickel and diming the poor people who really can't afford to have $5 a day taken away from them by the time they get, especially if they're paid bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, half their paycheck is going to be gone because you have these ridiculous, free money grabs for, the elite. And so Bangor passed a tenant bill of rights. And one of the things is you cannot charge an application fee unless if a lease is signed. And I think this bill needs to be just across the board in this country because housing is a disaster right now. I'm not one for communism, but, China doesn't really have very many homeless people. Like, they take care of that. And,
touching a whole different topic there.
Right,
but you're right. I mean, listen, there's definitely a lot of work to be done. We're not a perfect nation as people may think. We are better than some in some areas, but to your point, there's still a lot of work to be done here, and it's unfortunate, but it is reality. And people are trying to make a difference every now and then. Every day, there's someone that's actually doing something about things. But it's you can't change a system that has been in place for a long time, and it's very difficult to circumvent some stuff. And you got to work with it. And again, unfortunately, we're not taught to be smart enough to actually navigate the system early on.
Well, they want to keep us stupid. They want to keep us stupid because then we're easier to extort and manipulate. If people are uneducated, then they don't know you're screwing them over. And one of my favorite, I hate what he said, but I appreciate the honesty. I can't remember what president it was, but they said, if you can convince the lowest white man that he is just a little bit better than the highest black man, he will pay you to rip him off. And that is what is happening with this country, with the divide and, it's the black people, they're all criminals. And, it's the Spanish people, they're coming over the borders and bringing the drugs. You know what? That reminds me of, when I was in prison, Paula Page got on TV and said, black thugs from the hood come up to Maine and impregnate our white women and flood our streets with drugs. And I'm sitting there like, man, I was a drug dealer. And I can tell you firsthand, the only reason these black thugs are coming up here is because white people are going down and getting them. Whether it's a confidential informant working for the police to, get their quota up on how many arrests they have, or, a drug addict trying to make money and become a drug dealer, whatever it may be, it is not them just coming up here. It is the white people from Maine going down and getting them. And you see that at the Texas border now. They're saying, the refugees, the cartels loading them up with drugs. 80% of the drug busts are Americans going and getting it. Like, stop demonizing these people and, passing the blame off because you want to demonize them and, dehumanize them and make people think they're a problem when really they just need help.
I think you found another vocation right now, and that is really politics. You will do a terrific job. I mean, you're gonna rub a lot of folks, the wrong way. But I think, listen, politics is all about that, right? You gotta push, through the agenda, but you do have a voice about it, and you have a different, I guess, visual because you've encountered some of these things, the realities that most people are not seeing every day. You've seen the other side of where this world is, and so you have a different outlook on things, and that's I mean, you share with people, so people are hearing it and seeing it. And now maybe someone's like, oh, I think I see what you're talking about here, because we might see this stuff and we think it's happening just there. And, and
Right.
you walk right by it and sometimes you don't even acknowledge it, but it's happening and it's real.
Listen, the feds took me all the way from Maine to Oklahoma, over a dozen facilities. It's happening in all of them. There is not a single facility in this country that is not unnecessarily harming somebody. And they're getting a pat on the back for it because they're rehabilitating them. And it's
Well, listen, I mean, some people can say that the American prison system is probably better than some other countries in a way, maybe. But there are countries with no prison systems, that they actually, literally don't have. Like, I mean, some of the Scandinavian countries. I mean, I think they have them, but no one's there or something like that. I mean, there were some case studies that people don't they have empty facilities, as opposed to, because they have different things. So and there's the other, like you said, there's the drugs, there's so many things that can contribute to someone actually becoming in that system.
yes.
And once you're in the system, it's over, because it's coming out of it is difficult. But you did, you're out of it. You were able to take the time, and now you are carving out a different path for you. You are actually an entrepreneur now. You are taking it on the road. And by the way, you using what skills you have, and art is your thing, and you're doing it. It's gonna take on, as long as you keep at it. I'm sure that's gonna make it happen. The more you do of these talks and stuff, it's gonna just explore, expose the actual products more and more to people around. And I'm assuming these things can be sold all over the world, not just in the States, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's online, right?
Yeah.
All right. And yeah, and again, I mean, we've exceeded the hour. I mean, there's more to talk about here, but really, I like what you said about you wouldn't change anything because of your son, and that is probably, most people will do whatever it takes for their kids, they'll die for their kids, right? And so, that's probably the most beautiful thing that you've had, and that's where you went through what you went through, and as unfortunate as it is, but you did. Now I'm assuming he's been taken care of by the parents, and he's
Right.
grown, and he appreciates it, and now you're here, and he's back in your life, you're back in his life, and that's a good ending, I would
Yeah.
say, to a very horrible story. Which again, in the movie, that would be a nice little ending. If
Yeah.
if this was 2 years from now, literally, because that's where our media company is heading, I would have literally taken this movie on. But maybe you never know. Time
Hey,
will
hit
tell.
me up in a couple years whenever you guys got it figured
Yeah,
out.
but it is an interesting story of a lot of things, and it depicts a real story, from a family to motherhood, to the system, to the corruption, maybe to business. I mean, it's all in all, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this discussion today. I mean, it's really a lot of things, some things to avoid, some things to potentially learn about and educate ourselves more about, so we don't fall into the trap. And also, like, the hope part, that no matter what happens, look at the bright side and take that, and eventually move on.
Yeah.
The past
Man,
is past.
laughter makes the pain go down easier. That's my advice for the day. Like, it really does.
So I did have one more question. I want to ask it just because. Were you ever approached by religious, folks, as a
God.
means to get you out of the system or any of that? Just because
No.
I know that there is that path. Some people choose the church or whatever religion, denomination you want to make a difference. Was that something that you've entertained?
I can say that I found God in jail, and I love the Lord Jesus Christ. I just don't like the corrupt institutions that weaponize his teachings to oppress people with. And, one girl tried to order some of the banned books of the Bible. And I used to be like, oh, you got to follow the Bible, got to follow the Bible. And then this girl tried to order some of the banned books of the Bible in prison, and they wouldn't let her have it. So naturally, I had to read them when I got out, because oppositional defiance and whatever diagnosis they put along with that. And I have to say, y'all should read the rest of the story. It's really pretty good. And like, for instance, all the books written by women, automatic blasphemy. And it really gives the power back to the people. And it's so funny because that was my first experience with banned books, and now it's like a really big deal everywhere because there are all these books being banned, and people don't like that. And I think it's so funny. They've been
I start you up, huh? I started a whole new show with
I know. Sorry.
no, but it's good. But again, and the reason I asked because, typically there is a tendency of finding God, and whichever, again, different ways of doing that. In jail, there's a big, I guess, component of that, and so people do come out in a better way that way. But even before you went in, was there any help from, let's say, the church for you? None,
No,
right?
I asked churches for help, and they said, well, you don't go here, so we're not going to help you. I'm like, yeah, how Christ-like of you.
I mean, it could have been any other denomination, not necessarily church or Christianity. But have you tried any? I mean, obviously you did, and it was not. It was a dead end.
No, I like, I'm kind of one of those omnipotent. I don't know if I'm saying the word right, but I find value and wisdom in all religions. They all have something really great to offer, and this whole, oh, you have to just choose one. No, I'm on my own path, and that is for me and whatever higher power is up there to figure out. And I'm not going to follow some denomination because men are telling me I have to. And yeah.
All right, now that answers that. But again, it is a, sometimes people do tend to. I mean, sometimes they do find God literally in a way, and it helps them.
I've had really strange supernatural experiences my whole life, and I was really kind of scared of it for a while. But I really, I think I came in contact with some darker entities before I really found the ones that were, coming from the light. But yeah.
And listen, remember, there's the good and the bad, and you can easily veer out to one or the other, and it's very difficult sometimes to once you're in one aspect of life, it becomes very. If you're in the dark side, I mean, that's just like Star Wars, right? Come to the dark side versus the Force may be with you or the Sith, right? So it's the same concept here. I mean, and those are movie concepts, but they're really based on real stuff. I mean, there is a tendency to go evil. There's a tendency to go good. And finding that nice little play, is sometimes difficult for people. And you're right. Sometimes it takes experiences that are tragic to actually get you wherever. But the good news is you are in a better place. You are in a better spirit. You are in a better mood. You are doing things for yourself. Life is moving on, in a better way. And I think there's no better outcome than that. I mean, there's certainly better outcomes for you to get, more successful and so on and so forth. But today, you are living a normal life. And again, normal is a, figure of speech here because what's normal, right? But you are living, what people would think, as a normal. And it's difficult because you still have to live with that I guess, label, because unfortunately people do have that. That's not. But what I like about, what you go is that you don't care. Because you are out there. I mean, no, I like you. You're talking about it, and it's not something. You're not ashamed of it, because that's past. And you are here today, and you're taking it to the next level. And that's really another message for people. The past is gone. You learn from it. Today is a great moment. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet. So you just keep working towards a better future. That's it.
Well, it's funny because usually the people that are so quick to judge me are the fastest to crumble over, the slightest little inconvenience in their life. And it kind of makes me laugh, because it's like, I mean, you can't even deal with that. Like, you would not last a second in my shoes, even let alone walking the path that I did. And so it's, I find, the most judgmental people are the ones who really couldn't handle it at all.
And with that, we have to be clear that, it's best not to judge people, because you don't know.
Yeah.
Every day you see people, you have no idea what they're going through. Whether they're going in a rush in the car, whether they're going slow, you don't know what they're thinking. What they might have lost their job. Maybe they're going because they're gonna have an interview. They might have a problem, domestic, thing. It could be anything, and no one knows what's that except those people.
Right.
So don't judge people.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, it's amazing how sometimes unless you put the shoes on somebody like other people's shoes on, if you fit those shoes, that's fine. But typically, you're not going to do it unless you try those and walk
Yeah.
into them, because that's when the pain happens. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's tough. But that's true for all different things in life, right? Doesn't matter what you do. If you haven't tried it, you can't judge it. It's one thing to have an opinion, but do it first, then have an opinion. That's the difference.
Right.
Because if you don't do it, you're not going to. Now, some people say, well, I'm not going to do bad things to get an opinion. But I would agree. If we know drugs are bad, you're not going to do drugs. But you
Right.
never know what happened, what triggered. And sometimes we're lucky not to get to those problems. Not everybody gets lucky. If you get
Right.
lucky, thank God for it, or and just be thankful that you didn't get into that system, right? And that's it. So.
I used to think that drug addicts were weak, like they were like mentally weak for not being able to stop. And then I got humbled in the most brutal way possible, where I didn't have a choice. I didn't even choose to do the drug. It was forced on me. And so, that was one of those really humbling experiences that, I went through, because I used to pass judgment. So, I mean, I understand it, but
Well, listen,
if I can bring awareness and compassion, I'll do that too.
well, listen. I think we all have made that mistake, and I don't think if you're human, you haven't made the mistake to judge somebody, only to realize that, oh man, I shouldn't have, and that's the thing. Like, people are going through tough times every day, and you don't know, and you can appear to be having the best life, even the most prominent Hollywood stars, right? I mean, people die, and only to find out why, something happened to them. It's crazy, right? You never know what people are going through until it's over, and until you're like, oh my God, what happened? They looked happy. Well, appearances can be very deceiving, right? And unfortunately, that's reality. Well, Elizabeth, this was an interesting, very, very, unique, I would say, show in a lot of aspects. We've talked about a lot of different things. You've enlightened us about a whole world that probably people are like, who? I didn't know that this happened. And by the way, this is the States, but if you live in another part of the country, because this is actually a worldwide show. I mean, if you live in any part of the world, I mean, things could be worse, things could be better. You never know.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to watch movies, it's one thing to actually, but really hearing stories, live stories from people's own past and experiences. It is humbling, and and if you are a parent out there, whatever you can do to help your kids, maybe be part of their lives so they don't go and maybe sometimes make the wrong choice. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it happens, right? It's difficult. There's so many things that can be done, but we can all support and help somehow, somewhere, and that's all that matters, right? And I am sorry that you had to go through all this, but you said it. You could not be who you are today if you didn't go through these things, and that's a good way to look at things. I mean, that's just your mindset right now. That's talking proper, right? It's like, I can't do nothing about that, but I can learn from it and make it better, right? And you did. So I know you said your last words of wisdom, I think, but if you want to recap something and send it to our audiences, what would that be?
Give people compassion. Just show them compassion. I mean, I didn't get better and really start to heal till I was shown compassion. And if you guys want to help inmates, you can sign up to be volunteers and do little Bible studies. And there was one guy that came and he did a writing class with us. And just get them out of the pod, give them some hope, give them someone to talk to, treat them like a human being. Like, you have no idea how grateful we were for that, especially in the county jails. And books, if you have old books, please donate them to your local jails, because they don't put money, for inmate, to have stimulation, and people just lose their mind in there because there's nothing, for them to stimulate their mind with.
All right. Well, listen, it is good advice. I mean, to your point, I mean, I do tend to believe people can make mistakes. And sometimes, not everybody is a bad person that winds up in a system. And you're right, they're still human, and God forgives. I think we should, but I'm not. Again, I'm saying that with a grain of salt because I mean sometimes I
Yeah,
believe
I'm
in
not talking
punishment.
about sex offenders or like
Yeah, yeah.
murderers or
If
anything.
you
I'm
if
talking
you
about the
do
majority.
Yeah, if you do the crime, the time as they say, that's one thing. But I mean, that's a different justice. But it has to be done with justice. That's the
Right.
concept. So it's not just in the system. It's got to be proper justice. And yes, you're not supposed to be abused and going through different things, unless it is some sort of a punishment that is part of your verdict, whatever, which doesn't exist in the states, anyways. I mean, unless
No.
we're not in that system, right? But again, Elizabeth, it's been real. I mean, as real as it gets. This talk was one of probably the most interesting and powerful topics I've had, to tackle and interact with. But you know what? I learned quite a bit myself, and I know that at least we've learned a few things that can open our minds and our eyes bigger and so on and so forth. At least understand what people are going through, and you never know, what that is, right? And so I want to thank you for being with us today and really sharing the whole, shebang. I mean, you went all around, but it was worth the time. I think we've covered quite a bit. Um, Folks, I hope you've had an interesting, show with us today, and really we took you on a quick ride in multiple years of different ordeals, up and down, but we ended up with positive, outcomes, and that's where we are today. Elizabeth is moving towards her target of becoming, a business person who's successful and hopefully taking her products and company bigger and bigger. We look forward to seeing that in the real world, as a design, as a brand itself, which can happen. Just keep up the work. That's it. That's all I have to say. So, American Age, we'll be talking soon. New day, new show and topic. Bye for now.